You're listening to the CyberWire Network, powered by N2K.
More Chumba Casino fan mail. Love this. It says, Dear Ryan, I love Chumba Casino. They're so much fun. I love the wild ride from the social slots to the Slingo to jackpots quicker than a 6-time real spin. Everybody's finding their fun at Chumba Casino. Why don't you find out for yourself? Head to ChumbaCasino.com and enjoy hundreds of casino-style games for free with your welcome bonus. Sponsored by Chumba Casino. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus terms and conditions apply.
And now a word from our sponsor, the Data Citizens Dialogues podcast. As a listener of this podcast, you're probably at least marginally interested in data, especially about all the different ways that it shapes our world. So I want to recommend the Data Citizens Dialogues podcast. This is a forward-thinking show brought to you by the folks at Calibra. They are the leaders in data intelligence. You're going to hear firsthand from all sorts of people, industry titans, innovators, executives from some of the largest companies as they dive into the hottest topics in data. You're going to get insights into everything from popular things such as AI governance and data sharing down to more nuanced questions like how do we ensure data readability at a global scale? So, while data may be shaping our world, Data Citizens Dialogue is shaping the conversation. I want to encourage you to follow Data Citizens Dialogue on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Check it out. We thank Data Citizens Dialogue for sponsoring our show. We've got an election day wrap-up. The FBI issues a warning about cyber criminals selling government email credentials. Google issues an emergency update for Chrome. An Interpol operation nets dozens of arrests and IP takedowns. Microchip Technology discloses $21 million in expenses related to a cybersecurity breach. Ransomware makes a Georgia hospital revert to paper records. South Korea fines Meta $15 million over privacy violations. A cyber attack disables panic alarms on British prison vans. A small city in Kansas recovers from a devastating pig butchering scheme. Our guest today is Javed Hassan, CEO and co-founder of Lineage, discussing the growing risks within the open source ecosystem and sending data down the compressed air superhighway. It's Wednesday, November 6, 2024. I'm Dave Bittner, and this is your CyberWire Intel Briefing. Thanks for joining us here today. It is great to have you with us. Donald Trump won the U.S. presidential election yesterday, and so will be headed back to the White House in January. In his previous term, Trump emphasized bolstering U.S. cyber defenses, but took a somewhat fragmented approach, disbanding the White House cybersecurity coordinator role and leaving certain interagency efforts decentralized. Under the Biden administration, cybersecurity took on new urgency with major investments in critical infrastructure protections, zero-trust architecture, and public-private partnerships. With Trump back in office, we might expect a pivot, possibly rolling back some regulatory elements or shifting priorities toward a more streamlined, business-friendly cybersecurity policy. But as threats evolve, especially with increased ransomware incidents and foreign cyber influence campaigns, Trump's administration will face new pressure to sustain the resilience and innovations introduced in recent years. Time will tell. CISA reported no credible threats against U.S. voting infrastructure during Election Day, with only minor anticipated disruptions observed. CISA Director Jen Easterly confirmed that no evidence indicated malicious interference with election security or integrity. Despite former President Trump's claims of fraud in swing states like Michigan and Pennsylvania, Easterly and senior CISA advisor Kate Conley stated that no data supported these allegations. The most significant disruption involved false bomb threats in multiple swing states, including nearly 40 in Georgia, which officials traced to Russian email domains. However, Easterly cautioned that the origin of these threats is still under investigation and that Russia's involvement is not confirmed. Additionally, the FBI was targeted in disinformation campaigns, leading it to debunk false election-related claims involving its name. CISA anticipates issuing a statement soon on the resilience of U.S. election infrastructure as the certification process continues. The FBI has issued a warning about a surge in cybercriminals selling high-quality government email credentials and related instructions on cybercrime forums. These credentials, often sold with stolen subpoena documents, enable attackers to pose as law enforcement and send fraudulent emergency data requests to bypass traditional security checks. These scams can facilitate espionage, data extortion, or ransomware attacks. The FBI noted this trend began over a year ago, evolving from basic phishing scams to sophisticated credential sales across 25 countries. Recent incidents include attackers simulating urgent law enforcement requests, exploiting pressure tactics to elicit sensitive data quickly. To mitigate these risks, the FBI advises organizations to enhance security protocols, such as monitoring third-party connections, enforcing two-factor authentication, and adopting critical thinking before responding to urgent data requests. Attackers often rely on rushed responses, so verifying request legitimacy can prevent falling victim to these scams. Google has issued an emergency update for Chrome addressing two high-severity vulnerabilities related to use-after-free bugs in the family experiences and serial components. These vulnerabilities could allow attackers to execute malicious code on affected systems, posing risks of unauthorized access or complete system compromise. The patch was released on November 5th for Windows, Mac, and Linux users. Google strongly advises users to update immediately to protect against these security threats. Interpol's Operation Synergia 2, conducted from April through August of this year, resulted in 41 arrests and the dismantling of over 1,000 servers involved in cybercrime across 95 countries. With intelligence support from cybersecurity firms like Group IB and Kaspersky, the operation identified over 30,000 suspicious IP addresses, with about 75% of these taken offline. Authorities seized 59 servers and 43 electronic devices for further investigation, and another 65 individuals are under scrutiny for cyber-related activities. Highlights include actions in Hong Kong, where just over 1,000 servers were taken down, and in Mongolia, where 21 house searches led to a server seizure. The operation targeted phishing, ransomware, and information stealer malware, which are top threats. Interpol noted a rise in generative AI being used for phishing, and that information stealers often serve as entry points for ransomware, which surged by 70% last year. Microchip Technology disclosed a $21.4 million expense related to a cybersecurity breach in its latest financial report. The incident, discovered in August, disrupted some of Microchip's manufacturing facilities. The Play ransomware group claimed responsibility, alleging they stole gigabytes of sensitive data, including client documents and employee information. Microchip did not pay a ransom, and the hackers have since leaked a 4-gigabyte archive reportedly containing payroll, accounting, and contract information. By early September, Microchip had restored most operations and confirmed the data breach. Memorial Hospital and Manor in Bainbridge, Georgia, was hit by a ransomware attack, disabling access to its electronic health record system. Discovered early Saturday, the attack forced staff to revert to paper-based records, but reportedly did not impact patient care. The Embargo ransomware group claimed responsibility, threatening to release 1.15 terabytes of stolen data unless a ransom is paid by November 8th. Embargo, a new ransomware-as-a-service group, uses double extortion tactics, demanding ransom and threatening data leaks if unpaid. South Korea's privacy watchdog fined Meta $15 million for illegally collecting and sharing sensitive data, including political views, sexual orientation, and religious beliefs, from approximately 980,000 Facebook users. Meta reportedly shared this data with around 4,000 advertisers without obtaining explicit user consent, violating strict South Korean privacy laws. The investigation revealed that Meta used data on user activities to infer sensitive information, flagged as a serious breach. Alongside unauthorized data sharing, Meta's inadequate security measures left accounts vulnerable to hacking, allowing attackers to exploit inactive pages for identity theft. This fine adds to Meta's recent penalties worldwide for privacy violations, highlighting increasing regulatory scrutiny. Meta stated it would carefully review the decision, but has not clarified if it will appeal. A recent cyber attack on telematics firm Microlease has temporarily disabled critical tracking and panic alarm systems on British prison vans, operated by Serco for the Ministry of Justice. While there's no evidence that anyone has tried to exploit the situation, the incident does highlight the potential risks of supply chain vulnerabilities. Microlease informed the London Stock Exchange of the breach, later clarifying that while employee data may have been accessed, it's confident customer systems remain secure. Recovery efforts are underway, with services expected to be back to normal by next week. The FBI has recovered $8 million from a $47 million cryptocurrency scam that severely impacted the small Kansas city of Elkhart. The scam, pig butchering, involved convincing Heartland Tri-State Bank CEO Shan Haynes to continually invest in a fake cryptocurrency, initially with his own money and later with embezzled funds from local entities, including the Elkhart Church of Christ. Haynes, using his trusted position, authorized massive wire transfers to the scammer. Despite staff concerns, he misled them about the transaction's purpose. After a tip-off in July of 2023, an investigation revealed losses exceeding the bank's capitalization. Haynes was sentenced to over 24 years in prison. The recovered funds will be returned to local investors, offering some relief to the devastated community. Coming up after the break, my conversation with Javed Hassan from Lineage. We're discussing the growing risks within open source ecosystems. Stay with us. Hey everybody, Dave here. I want to talk about our sponsor, LegalZoom. You know, I started my first business back in the early 90s, and what I would have done to have been able to have the services of an organization like LegalZoom back then. Just getting all of those business ducks in a row, all of that technical stuff, the legal stuff, the registrations of the business, the taxes, all of those things that you need to go through when you're starting a business, the hard stuff, the stuff that sucks up your time when you just want to get that business launched and out there. Well, LegalZoom has everything you need to launch, run, and protect your business all in one place. And they save you from wasting hours making sense of all that legal stuff. Launch, run, and protect your business to make it official today at LegalZoom.com. You can use promo code CYBER10 to get 10% off any LegalZoom business information product, excluding subscriptions and renewals. That expires at the end of this year. Get everything you need from setup to success at LegalZoom.com and use promo code CYBER10. That's LegalZoom.com and promo code CYBER10. LegalZoom provides access to independent attorneys and self-service tools. LegalZoom is not a law firm and does not provide legal advice except where authorized through its subsidiary law firm, LZ Legal Services, LLC. When it comes to ensuring your company has top-notch security practices, things can get complicated fast. Vanta automates compliance for SOC 2, ISO 27001, HIPAA, and more, saving you time and money. With Vanta, you can streamline security reviews by automating questionnaires and demonstrating your security posture with a customer-facing trust center. Over 7,000 global companies like Atlassian, Flow Health, and Quora use Vanta to manage risk and prove security in real time. Our listeners can claim a special offer of $1,000 off Vanta at vanta.com/cyber. That's VANTA.com/cyber for $1,000 off Vanta. Javed Hassan is CEO and co-founder of Lineage. I recently caught up with him to discuss the growing risks within open source ecosystems.
So the state of things as we see it is open source has become more and more important, especially over the last decade, as companies have used open source inside their applications. We have seen a steady increase of the use of open source in both critical applications and business applications. And as that has increased, the risk from open source is increasing as well. And where we find ourselves today is that in most modern applications, 80% or so of all components come from open source, while at the same time, the open source developers are great innovators and not as great maintainers, which is not surprising given where they come from. And so we find that at least Lineage analysis finds that about 50% of all open source is not maintained. 20% is maintained, which means that it has updates over the last 6 months to 2 years, and about 30% is well maintained. So 70% of open source is in a box where companies have embedded it in their applications, while it's no longer well maintained by open source developers. Creating a small bit of a challenge for companies that embed open source.
Yeah. How would you describe how most organizations approach the security issues of open source software? When they are using these components, what degree of scrutiny do they apply to these packages?
I mean, we have been working with a number of these organizations, and the way we see it is that much of open source choice is led by developers. Companies have been pretty good at making sure that the license compliance of open source is well done. And to some extent, they discover the vulnerabilities that are tied to at least top-level components of open source, not necessarily the full open source supply chain, which may be 60 levels deep. And they are then overwhelmed by the number of vulnerabilities that come through open source. Right. So I think that's what we are finding right now as the current state. Open source program offices are still rare in most companies. And so we think of that as a way most organizations can improve.
We had the incident not too long ago with XZ Utils, the backdoor incident, where someone was really playing the long game here, having access to an open source utility. Was that a bit of a wake-up call for the community?
I think it was a big wake-up call, right? I mean, again, we would expect that such incidents would increase, and as you saw, that it sort of made its way across from open source into a company like Microsoft without by and large scrutiny, and then an eagle-eyed developer, in a lab, found there was a performance issues in Microsoft analysis of the software and raised the alarm there, right? So it was detected by luck almost, or in that case. But those kinds of attacks, I think, would become more common as we go along.
So in your estimation, what's to be done here? I mean, how can companies both make use of the utility of open source software, but also take care of the security concerns?
Yeah, so, again, I mean, if you sort of now, let's take XZ as an example. What you should see if you analyze the open source, that the Linux that contained XZ, what you would see is that open source components embedded a private component. And like our lineage technology would have detected that. I think companies need better open source analysis tools than they have right now to be able to detect these kinds of threats and tampering in open source software and mitigate that threat. So I think simply is we have always innovated in terms of new threats come along, we build new tools to address them. And so I think open source security, like you said, there's a wake-up call, and the wake-up call leads to new tooling and new capabilities that companies need. And then we have startups like ours that are amazingly driven to solve those problems.
To what degree is there I call it a chain of custody when it comes to open source software? Is it easy to track, where it's been, who's had their hands on it, what changes have been made?
By and large, yes. Right. So if you I'll give you an example of what we do. And so if we take a top level open source component that a company would pick up, we'll go find out where it came from. So you have a PURL which tells you where the package came from. If you analyze the package well, which we do, you'll find the source code it comes from. So now you have both the package and the source code. And the source code should match the package, which means that the package is made up of the source code it says it is made up of. And as you analyze those two, you realize that they have incremental dependencies on other packages and other source code libraries. So you go scan them and find out if those have additional dependencies and so on and so forth till you create the full software supply chain, which might be, like I said, 60 levels deep. And then what you have to do is understand who embeds whom. But because software is well tracked in terms of code commits, in terms of changes, where the changes came from. What versions has which subcomponents and subcomponents and so on. And so it is possible, and we do that today, to create a full chain of custody, attested chain of custody list, and ensure that every component that you include came from the package it said it came from, and the package came from the source code it claimed to be coming from. And then every dependency they have at various levels also is attestable, so that that every package and source code is identical to what was published by the open source developers. And then you can have threat detection rules on top of it, which says that if your open source embeds private source code, for example, well, that's a red flag. So we are getting into an era of new kinds of threat detection and new kind of tampers that we haven't seen before. And so again, cybersecurity technologies like Lineage will help you detect those.
What are your recommendations for organizations who want to get a handle on this? I mean, what are some of the best practices from your point of view?
So two things, right? So one, have a clear governance policy for open source. I think just like if you worked at a car company, let's say, and you made cars, you would not let every engineer go and select the vendor of choice for your carburetor and so on and so forth, right? You manage it centrally, and supply chain management is a big part of car manufacturing. Similarly, in software, if you're going to go assemble software from open source and so on, you need to manage your software supply chain, and for which you must create and empower an open source management office or open source program office with clear governance policies and continuous assessment of the software that you bring into your company. And then you have to proactively look at it. Like I said, half of open source is no longer maintained, so you should be EOLing some parts of the open source that you use, replacing it with the new ones. And so active, proactive management of open source, I think, is one part of it, and governance of open source is one part of it. The second big part of it is you should be careful about where you source open source from. And so I think you increasingly should look at more, better sourcing rules, as opposed to a developer can pick it up from anywhere.
Our thanks to Javed Hassan from Lineage for joining us. And now, a word from our sponsor, NordPass. NordPass is an advanced password manager from the team behind NordVPN, designed to help keep your business safe from data leaks and cyber threats. It gives your IT professionals control over who has access to your company's data and makes it easy for everyone else on your team to use strong passwords. Right now, you can go to www.nordpass.com/cyberwire for 35% off the NordPass Business Yearly Plan. Don't miss out on that. And finally, do you remember pneumatic tubes? The invention from the 1850s propelled mail, packages, and even food through pipes using compressed air. And though it once seemed destined for futuristic transport, a la Futurama or Micronauts, it all but vanished in the 1900s with the rise of trucks and digital communication. But in an unexpected twist, pneumatic tubes are making a comeback, thanks to hospitals and even waste management. Hospitals now rely on advanced tube systems to zip around medical samples and medicines, leveraging automation and RFID tracking to boost efficiency. Meanwhile, Roosevelt Island in New York and even Walt Disney World have been using tubes to whisk away rubbish since the 70s at an impressive 60 miles an hour. And the technology is expanding globally. Seoul, Barcelona, and Stockholm are using tubes for waste, reducing emissions by minimizing trash trucks. From farms to cannabis sorting, pneumatic tubes are quietly returning, proving that sometimes old tech just needs a fresh twist to stay relevant. So, forget those encrypted emails. If you really want privacy, maybe just blast your data through a pneumatic tube. And that's the CyberWire. For links to all of today's stories, check out our daily briefing at thecyberwire.com. We'd love to know what you think of this podcast. Your feedback ensures we deliver the insights that keep you a step ahead in the rapidly changing world of cybersecurity. If you like our show, please share a rating and review in your favorite podcast app. Please also fill out the survey in the show notes or send an email to cyberwire@n2k.com. We're privileged that N2K CyberWire is part of the daily routine of the most influential leaders and operators in the public and private sector, from the Fortune 500 to many of the world's preeminent intelligence and law enforcement agencies. N2K makes it easy for companies to optimize your biggest investment, your people. We make you smarter about your teams while making your teams smarter. Learn how at n2k.com. This episode was produced by Liz Stokes. Our mixer is Trey Hester, with original music and sound design by Elliot Peltzman. Our executive producer is Jennifer Iben. Our executive editor is Brandon Karp. Simone Petrella is our president, Peter Kilpie is our publisher, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here tomorrow. The IT world used to be simpler. You only had to secure and manage environments that you controlled. Then came new technologies and new ways to work. Now, employees, apps, and networks are everywhere. This means poor visibility, security gaps, and added risk. That's why Cloudflare created the first-ever connectivity cloud. Visit cloudflare.com to protect your business everywhere you do business.